Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I am your host, Cliff Garner, and I'm still in Santa Cruz, and it's been nice. It's been a wonderful vacation, not too hot, not too cold for the most part. Went to a farmer's market yesterday, picked up some radishes and some carrots and a little lettuce. Looked really good. And we got a roasted chicken for dinner last night from there. Lovely chicken, very, very tasty. Still have leftovers. I'll make some sandwiches a little bit later on. At any rate, it's been a good time. I've been enjoying the time with my brother, and but not only that, also the city itself has been just wonderful. People are really been interesting. Even the homeless people. Quite a few of them here. Okay, so something I've been talking about quite a bit. Well, really not so much lately, but very early on in the election last year, and also when I talk about the deep state, really not so much on the YouTube broadcast, but a lot of things that I'd written about on my some of the older things I wrote on as commentary on my Facebook page, that and including my American Amnesia page. It's been that there is a reconvergence, actually a reconnecting publicly of the Neocons and the neoconservatives, and so the power party is coming back together, as opposed to maintaining this pretense of separation. They may be actually leaving the Republican Party and joining the Democrats. And we were seeing more and more of that because of the opposition to Trump within the Republican Party and the Never Trumpers, and they were actually often openly backing Hillary Clinton in the election. And I've been warning my Democrat friends for quite a while now about this, that this is going to actually make the Democrats into a total warmongering party if it continues. The only claim to liberalism is to what have been called liberal issues. And that's actually pretty weak, because it's non-ideological for the most part. The identity politics and all that have taken the Democratic Party to really the heights with Obama has pretty much played out, and I knew it would. I called that even before Obama was elected, that if he were elected, that the identity politics would actually become a dead letter, and it is becoming a dead letter. So what I have here, I thank Tony Vieira, my friend, for posting, and I thank him on Facebook, because I also posted it there and let me know that I was going to do this as my next program here. That this article confirms and backs up a lot of what I've been saying for quite a while now. in terms of this reunion of the Neocons and Neo-Libs. And the real difference between the two is very small. And if you and actually I was rather well disposed, I suppose, to the Neocons on the whole. Not initially. My own personal journey was more libertarian anyway, and but at the same time, I didn't oppose the idea of war and state building and things of this nature. I examined these things, and I came to the conclusion at one point that if they truly upheld what they were saying about building the states and improving life for people and bringing democracy to the world, that this would be a good thing. And had they done that, had they actually done that, which they could have done, then the world would be a better place. Momentarily. Okay, well, I had to take that call, and very necessary. But at any rate, my own personal journey was from anarchism to libertarianism, but I did look into the idea of the neocons and what they were trying to propose, and I suppose it was the residual Trotskyism that really kind of appealed to me. The anti-racism and all that kind of stuff that really kind of defined the whole neocon movement, and the idea of removing borders and this globalist vision of really a one world government, that idea in and of itself does not appeal to me. But if it were to be done in a correct way, promoting democracy and really not just democracy, but the rule of law and equality and notions of caring for the whole planet, actually. It did appeal to me, and I think it appeals to a lot of other people who are still kind of conned by this stuff. With the Neocons and Neo-Libs, they were looking for the free markets, the open borders, and the movement of people freely, and it sounds good at first blush, but when you see what they actually do, that's another thing, and so you have the demise of democracy within the EU. It's totally, as it has been becoming more and more of a political entity as opposed to just an economic agreement and agreement on certain other things as a treaty between several different nations. As it developed in that direction, what we ended up with is profoundly anti-democratic, anti-egalitarian, highly corporate. See, that's where it kind of all falls apart. I'm not pro-corporate in my thinking. I don't think that in and of itself that these corporations, especially once they reach the international dimensions, should be allowed to be outside the political control. Well, it's in order to make capitalism work, the government has to have sufficient clout to be able to rein in economic entities. if they do not have that sufficient power, the economic entities end up actually ruling it. That's where the breakdown comes in. And in my hopes, when we went into the war in Iraq, the second war particularly, that they betrayed all of that, and these ideas of truly building a nation, they undermined it from the beginning, and increasingly Erdogan was being encouraged to pull it apart for his own benefit in the north. There were other factors too, but that was a huge one, and one that I saw very closely when I was living in Turkey. And so when I saw the results and talked to some of the victims of this nation building in Iraq in particular, but I met some others from that were in Afghanistan and later on Libya and Syria, that I saw the victims up close, that my mind changed. I mean, what do you tell a person who's been through that? Do you give them a platitude? I mean, really, what do you tell them? I think sorry. I was deceived. It was a good place to start. So the fact is that as the more I looked at and dealt with the Neo-Lib, Neocon globalist vision, as I lived abroad, really changed my mind towards both sides of that. There were times that I cozied up to the Clintons, and there were times that I just detested them. They just made me cringe constantly. But there were aspects of what they did that I did like at the time, and you probably heard me say, and I'll say it again, at the time that Obama named Hillary Clinton Secretary of State, I thought it was brilliant. But I also thought Obama was somebody else, and I really have no illusions whatsoever of Hillary Clinton any longer. That's for sure. She has disabused me of all my illusions. Hang on a second. I got a problem with my cord. Before the power goes out. There we go. So that was a very important development in my own thinking. My ideas have been all over the place, and I've kind of returned to more of a libertarian thinking, and that's partly never changed. I've never been a big corporate fan, and I've never been a very big fan of big government either. But a decentralized world government, I really was thinking that would be a great idea. That in the aspect of the regional governments would globally step up into their places and to delegate. That's an ideal, and I had my ideals, and I saw some people that were moving in directions I thought were good, and it turned out they betrayed them all. So that said, we come to the article that my friend Tony posted, and it's from The Intercept, and Glenn Greenwald, whom I generally like quite a bit. There's a couple things he said and did that I got a bit upset about. It's titled, with new DC policy group, Dems continue to rehabilitate and unify with Bush-era neocons. And the date on that is July 17th, 2017. Okay, we'll go right to the article. One of the most under-discussed yet consequential changes in the American political landscape is the reunion between the Democratic Party and the country's most extreme and discredited neocons. While the rise of Donald Trump, whom neocons loathe, has accelerated this realignment, it began long before the ascension of Trump and is driven by far more common beliefs and contempt for the current president. Actually, we can trace it to really the Clinton era, where they coalesced once again, and they did also under Obama. They did with Bush too, but they were also being highly criticized by the Democratic Party under Bush. And now with Trump, who opposes these ideas, particularly from the globalist perspective, that now you have them really by droves running back to the Democrats. But that's where they started. A newly formed and by all appearances well-funded national security advocacy group devoted to more hawkish U.S. policies toward Russia and other adversaries provides the most vivid evidence of this alliance. Calling itself the Alliance for Securing Democracy, the group describes itself as a bipartisan transatlantic initiative that will develop comprehensive strategies to defend against, deter, and raise the costs on Russian and other state actors' efforts to undermine democracy and democratic institutions, and also will work to publicly document and expose Vladimir Putin's ongoing efforts to subvert democracy in the United States and Europe, unquote. It is, in fact, the ultimate union of mainstream democratic foreign policy officials and the world's most militant and militaristic neocons. The group is led by two longtime Washington foreign policy hands from the establishment Democratic wing, the other key figure among leading GOP neocons. The Democrat, Laura Rosenberger, served as a foreign policy advisor for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign, and chief of staff to two Obama national security officials. The Republican is Jamie Fly, who spent the last 4 years as counselor for foreign and national security affairs to one of the Senate's most hawkish members, Marco Rubio. Prior to that, he served in various capacities in the Bush Pentagon and National Security Council. Fly's neocon pedigree is impressive indeed. During the Obama years, he wrote dozens of articles for the Weekly Standard, some co-authored with Bill Kristol himself, attacking Obama for insufficient belligerence towards Iran and terrorists generally, pronouncing Obama increasingly ill-suited to the world he faces as president by virtue of his supposed refusal to use military force frequently enough. Obama bombed 7 predominantly Muslim countries during his time in office, including an average of 72 bombs dropped per day in 2016 alone. Obama was actually a warmonger, and he's gotten a pass completely by the Democrats. But ironically, so many of these Democrats now are running to this neo-McCarthyite wackiness that they're infected. They're infected. Okay. The Democrats' new partner, Jamie Fly, spent 2010 working in tandem with Bill Kristol, urging military action, i.e., aggressive war, against Iran. In a 2010 Weekly Standard article co-written with Kristol, Fly argued that the key to changing Iran's thinking about its nuclear program is a serious debate about the military option, adding, it's time for Congress to seriously explore an authorization of military force to halt Iran's nuclear program. So I then went around the DC think tank circuit under the guise of advocating debate, espousing the need to use military force in Iran, spouting neocon innuendo such as we need to be wary of the Obama administration's intentions towards Iran. He mocked Obama officials and Bush officials before them for their, quote, obsession with diplomatic options, unquote, to resolve tensions with Iran short of war. The Crystal Fly duo returned in 2012 to more explicitly argue, isn't it time for the president to ask Congress for an authorization for use of military force against Iran's nuclear program? Beyond working as Rubio's foreign policy advisor, Fly was the executive director of the Foreign Policy Initiative, a group founded by Crystal along with two other leading neocons, Robert Kagan and Dan Sr., who was previously the chief spokesman for the Coalition Provisional Authority in Iraq. That whole connection there goes back to the formation of the government in Iraq that has been very highly tilted towards the Shiites, for one thing. But it's also created a situation in which the underrepresentation of the Sunnis has created the war status that it's been under, and it allowed Zarqawi to move in and bring his organization with him that became al-Qaeda in Iraq. They were extended the franchise by al-Qaeda, and later on their own they became the Islamic State, ISIS, and particularly in the Levant, which is Syria, Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, in that area, part of Turkey. So that disastrous development that went on over there, they're going to call that a positive, but it's actually blameworthy. But now as far as it went, if they had gone with a canton type regional governmental structure, I think they would have equally represented everybody within the country according to ethnic and religious divides, and been able to actually reunify the country. But they didn't want to do that. They really didn't want to do that. They wanted to leave the country under control of the West as much as possible, and to allow those people to suffer. And that was to achieve an end, which is namely the destabilization of the whole Middle East, and eventually the conquest of it. That's really what's up here. Anyway, that group is devoted to standard neocon agitprop, demanding a quote, renewed commitment to American leadership, unquote, on the ground that the United States remains the world's most dispensable nation. The U.S., as far as I'm concerned, and I have said it before and will continue to say, is the capital of the world. Period. Economically, politically, militarily, and every other way you want to name. In sum, as Vox's Dylan Matthews put it during the 2016 campaign, if you want a foreign policy advisor with strong ties to the neocon world, it's harder to do better than Fly. And that was in Vox. I got the little thing there. When it comes to this group, the alliance of Democrats with the most extreme neocon elements is visible beyond the group's staff leadership. Its board of advisors is composed of both leading Democratic foreign policy experts along with the nation's most extremist neocons. Thus, alongside Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor to Joe Biden, and the Clinton campaign, Mike Morrell, Obama's acting CIA director, and Mike McFaul, Obama's ambassador to Russia, sit leading neocons such as Mike Chertoff, Bush's Homeland Security Secretary, Mike Rogers, the far-right, supremely hawkish former congressman who now hosts a right-wing radio show, and Bill Kristol himself. In sum, just as it was true of the first Cold War, when neocons made their home among the cold warriors of the Democratic Party, on the key foreign policy controversy, there is now little to no daylight between leading Democratic Party foreign policy gurus and the Bush-era neocons who had wallowed in disgrace following the debacle of Iraq and the broader abuses of the War on Terror. That is why they are able to so comfortably to unify this way in support of common foreign policy objectives and beliefs. Democrats often justify this union as a mere marriage of convenience, a pragmatic temporary alliance necessitated by the narrow goal of stopping Trump. But for many reasons, that is an obvious pretext, unpersuasive in the extreme. This Democrat neocon reunion had been developing long before anybody believed Donald Trump could ascend to power, and this alliance extends to common perspectives, goals, and policies that have little to do with the current president. It is true that the neocons were among the earliest and most vocal GOP opponents of Trump. That was because they viewed him as an ideological threat to their orthodoxies, such as when he had advocated U.S. neutrality on the Israel-Palestine conflict and railed against the wisdom of the wars in Iraq and Libya. Libya was a pure disaster. But they were also worried that his uncouth, offensive personality would embarrass the U.S. and thus weaken the soft power needed for imperial hegemony. Even if Trump could be brought into line on neocon orthodoxy, as has largely happened, his ineptitude and instability posed a threat to their agenda. I've long discussed America as empire, and I have discussed this with many other people who also tend to have this idea, and we agree and disagree on a multitude of aspects of this, but I had a couple friends, and they're very angry with me right now because they thought that this empire. This entity of empire is not entirely bad. It can't be. I mean, it's made of humans. We're not capable of absolutes. But the fact is that because I live in America, and America is the center of the empire, it is the capital of that empire, that to some extent I have to be in favor of it. At least for the sake of my own survival. So when we would discuss this thing, because we're talking advanced political thinking here. It's like the Great Game. Are you going to pick Russia over the U.S. if you live here? No. So. Kind of similar concept, similar situation. Do we want the empire to be a conquering entity and to ride roughshod over the rest of the world? Well, Hillary Clinton was your pick, if you really knew what was going on. If you were looking for the chance of maybe humanizing the empire and decentralizing it somewhat, and to to stop it from being just a war-making machine, but to make it really looking at it from other angles, particularly humanistic and financial, even. You know, I mean, there's one of the nice things about having a president who has a business background is that he is capable of seeing things in a win-win realm of possibility. Political thinkers don't tend to do that. They tend to pick winners and losers. Win-win situations are capable of being brought about, especially financially. You know, it takes somebody who really understands money and what profit is to understand what's going on there. Marx didn't really get profit. He couldn't quite grasp the concept. And with Engel, the concept of profit was often aggressive. So Marxism tended to paint profit in a bad light, whereas you go to Smith, he didn't tend to see it in that way. Capital money doesn't work in a way that Marx thought. It just doesn't. And that's why economic Marxism in the long run is a failure, because it isn't realistic. And it had to go into other things. So this whole idea of empire, we're asking who would be the better custodian of that empire, and I disagreed very sharply with a lot of my friends that wanted to see it run in a more really militaristic way, and I was rather disappointed at that, because I've come to the conclusion that while there is a global aspect to any political reality, that there will be a globalistic kind of thing in one way, shape, or form. But which one it's going to take is the question. The Neocon Neo-Lib vision, with working with NAFTA and GATT and all these things, those are well, you kind of have to deal with them because they exist. But as far as what they've accomplished, I think has been very dubious in many cases, and the effects on certain places has been horrendous. And all we need to do is look at Iraq and Afghanistan with the drug problem there. I haven't even talked about that on anything. But those kinds of issues, and Libya and what happened to the people there, and what's happening in Syria, the whole refugee crisis in Europe, which really should be a non-starter. Those people really shouldn't be moved out of their own country, but they should be accommodated in a much better way than they have been. Which I think is one of the better things that Trump's done already by talking to Saudi Arabia about maybe helping them out. So, not uprooting people. Well, they're uprooting people. They want to uproot people. They want to have people in constant transit. They don't want stability, because they have uses for people that they really don't want to talk about. And slavery is one of the key issues in this movement of people without any accountability. And I've been saying this all along, and this is one of the reasons why I'm in trouble with some of my friends, because they don't want to either acknowledge the fact that that is the case, or that they actually agree, and some of them do actually agree that this is actually a good thing. I do not. I oppose this vehemently. It's wrong. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. let me back up and start that paragraph over again. It is true that neocons were among the earliest and most vocal GOP opponents of Trump. That was because they viewed him as an ideological threat to their orthodoxies, such as when he advocated for neutrality on the Israel-Palestine conflict and railed against the wisdom of wars in Iraq and Libya. But they were also worried about his uncouth, offensive personality would embarrass the U.S. and thus weaken the soft power, a very important thing, actually, but I disagree with him on this, needed for the imperial hegemony. Even if Trump could be brought into line on neocon orthodoxy, as has largely happened, his ineptitude and inability posed a threat to their agenda. But Democrats and neocons share far more than revulsion towards Trump, particularly once Hillary Clinton became the party's standard bearer. They share the same fundamental beliefs about the U.S. role in the world and how to assert U.S. power. There you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. In other words, this alliance is explained by far more than antipathy towards Trump. Indeed, the likelihood of a neocon Democrat reunion long predates Trump. Back in the summer of 2014, almost a year before Trump announced his intent to run for president, longtime neocon watcher Jacob Heilbrunn, writing in the New York Times, predicted that the neocons may be preparing a more brazen feat, aligning themselves with Hillary Clinton and her nascent presidential campaign in a bid to return to the driver's seat of American foreign policy. Noting that the Democrats' decade-long embrace of the Cold War belligerents that neocons loved most, from Truman and JFK to LBJ and Scoop Jackson, Heilbrunn documented the prominent neocons who, throughout Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State, were heaping praise on her and moving to align with her. Heilbrunn explained that the natural ideological affinity between neocons and establishment Democrats. And the thing is, quote, these neocons have a point, he wrote. Mrs. Clinton voted for the Iraq War, supported standing arms to Syrian rebels, likened Russia's President Vladimir V. Putin to Adolf Hitler, wholeheartedly backs Israel, and stresses the importance of promoting democracy. That's unquote. One finds evidence of this alliance long before the emergence of Trump. Victoria Nuland, for instance, served as one of Dick Cheney's top foreign policy advisors during the Bush years. Married to one of the most influential neocons, Robert Kagan, Nuland then seamlessly shifted into the Obama State Department and then became a top foreign policy advisor to the Clinton campaign. As anti-war sentiment grew among some GOP precincts, as evidenced by the success of the Ron Paul candidacies of 2008 and 2012, then Trump's early posturing as an opponent of U.S. interventions, neocons started to conclude that their agenda, which had never changed, would be better advanced by the realignment back into the Democratic Party. Writing in The Nation in early 2016, Matt Duss detailed how the neocon mentality was losing traction within the GOP and predicted. It's a block quote. Yet another possibility is that the neocons will start to migrate back to the Democratic Party, which they exited in the 1970s in response to the Vietnam-inspired anti-interventionism. This an aside. A lot of the people that entered into the Democratic Party at that time were the radicals from the 60s. I talk about the Great Sellout. Well, here it is. Here's one of the things that it caused. But in the process of maintaining power, a lot of them have actually embraced the very same concepts. And in fact, during the Carter years, even they were starting to do so, and that's where you get into that. Actually, the intervention in Afghanistan, which I was getting word about just from actually meeting soldiers that sometimes served in the special forces that were sent over there, and they would talk about some things, but not about others. But it goes back to this, and the changes started even then. And I met John Kerry in 1975. or 4. No. Yeah, 74. Right around the time that Nixon, just before Nixon resigned. So, you had this actually, the sellout was a sellout. And one of the things about Carter was that he was not a peace candidate. He might have done some things that, changed the way that it looked, but he was not a peace candidate. In fact, a lot of us, when I graduated from school, were worried that Carter was actually going to do some pretty nasty stuff abroad. He didn't do it. But he did do some secret stuff, on the sly. But that great sellout, there were consequences to it, and it cut both ways. So I'll back up on the block quote. Yet another possibility is that the Neocons will start to migrate back to the Democratic Party, which they exited in the 1970s in response to the Vietnam-inspired anti-interventionism. That's what earned their faction the Neo prefix in the first place. As Nation contributor James Carden recently observed, there are signs that prominent neocons have started gravitating towards Hillary Clinton's campaign. But the question is, now that the neocons have been revealed as having no real grassroots to deliver, and that their actual constituency consists almost entirely of a handful of donors subsidizing a few dozen think tankers, journalists, and letterheads, why would Democrats want them back? The answer to that question, why would Democrats want them back, is clear. Because, as this new group demonstrates, Democrats find large amounts of common cause with neocons when it comes to foreign policy. The neocons may be migrating back to the Democratic Party and into the open embrace of its establishment, but their homecoming will not be a seamless affair. Dus, for instance, is now the top foreign policy advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders. After spending little energy on foreign affairs as a candidate, Sanders' hiring of Dus is a sign that he sees a rejection of interventionism as ascendant with the populist element of the party. He will have allies from from whatever is left of the faction within the Obama administration, which willingly took so much heat from the foreign policy establishment for its insufficient aggression towards Russia or other perceived enemies. And again, Obama in his perception is weak and non-interventionist is not true. But it's perception. Perception is politics. Senator Chris Murphy, for instance, has been vocal in his opposition to the arming of the Saudis as they savage Yemen. Let me repeat that. Senator Chris Murphy, for instance, has been vocal in his opposition to arming the Saudis as they savage Yemen. But now that hawkish rhetoric and belligerent policies have subsumed the Democrats, it remains to be seen how much of that anti-intervention survives. For many years, long before the 2016 election, one of the leading neocon planks was that Russia and Putin pose a major threat to the West. And Obama was far too weak and deferential to stand up to this threat. From the start of the Obama presidency, the Weekly Standard warned that Obama failed to understand and refused to confront the dangers posed by Moscow. From Ukraine to Syria, neocons constantly attacked Obama for letting Putin walk all over them. I don't think he really could have done a whole lot different in Ukraine, to be honest. And I saw that from fairly close by. Yeah, so there you have it. That Obama was weak on Russia and failing to stand up to Putin was a major attack theme for the most hawkish GOP senators such as Rubio and John McCain. Writing in National Review 2015, Rubio warned that Putin was acting aggressively in multiple theaters, but as the evidence of failure grows, President Obama still can't seemed to understand Vladimir Putin's goals. Rubio insisted that Obama and Clinton's failure to confront Putin was endangering the West. Block quote. In sum, we need to replace the policy of weakness with a policy of strength. We need to restore American leadership to make clear to our adversaries that they will pay a significant price for aggression. But President Obama's policies of retreat and retrenchment are making the world a more dangerous place. The Obama-Clinton-Russia's policy has already undermined European security. We can't let Putin wreak even more havoc in the Middle East. And that's unquote. In 2015, Obama met with Putin in the UN General Assembly, and leading Republicans excoriated him for doing so. Obama has, in fact, strengthened Putin's hand, said Rubio. McCain issued a statement denouncing Obama for meeting with the Russian tyrant, accusing him of failing to stand up to Putin across the world. That Putin was a grave threat, and Obama was too weak in the face of it, was also a primary theme of Jeb Bush's presidential campaign. They have a tweet from Jeb Bush that says, Obama allows Russia and Iran more influence in Syria and Iraq. Not good for U.S., Israel, or our moderate Muslim partners. And it's got a connection, link to a WAPO, Washington Post article. Russia's move into Syria upends U.S. plans. Yeah, it did. In fact, Russia's movement into Syria caused Obama to back away. And it was probably the smartest move that he did in the whole time he was president. And he left Erdogan out to dry. Erdogan was furious. That's where he kept trying to find the red lines, and that's where the gas attack that occurred in 2013 to try to get Obama to come in, and Obama said, maybe we'll go to Mali. When that occurred, that was probably, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, that was probably a false flag. And it was done by al-Nusra. That seems to be the evidence. And so you can see where the Neocons and their plans line up with things like Erdogan's neo-Ottomanism. Right? He would be the regional hegemon over the Balkans and over the Middle East. That's what the deal was. Oh, he was happy as can be to be handed that power, and it changed his mind from doing his good neighbor policy to becoming actually a very aggressive neighbor, backing al-Nusra and backing ISIS. You can see the results. Even back in 2012, Mitt Romney repeatedly accused Obama of being insufficiently tough on Putin, prompting the now famous mockery by Obama and Democrats generally of Romney's Russophobia, which they ridicule as an ancient relic of the Cold War, and rightly so. Indeed, before Trump's emergence, the hardcore pro-GOP neocons planned to run against Hillary Clinton by tying her to the Kremlin and warning that her victory would empower Moscow. Even through this 2016 election, McCain and Rubio repeatedly attacked Obama for failing to take Russian hacking seriously enough and for failing to retaliate. And for years before that, Russia was a primary obsession for neocons from the time it went to war with Georgia, at the time headed by a neocon-loved president even prior to that. That's when I first moved to Turkey. And we got word from people about the Turkish Navy being scrambled into the Black Sea. And some American ships went through also. when you live in a place, you actually see a lot of stuff. And when you live in a different place than the U.S., you really get a different perspective if you pay attention. But a lot of people are caught up in the idea of being the guest of a country and being treated rather nicely and being paid rather well. Keep your eyes open and you really learn a lot. Thus, when it came time for the Democrats to elevate Putin and Russia into a major theme of the 2016 campaign, now that their hawkishness towards Moscow is their go-to weapon for attacking Trump, neocons have become their natural ideological allies. The song Democrats are now singing about Russia and Putin is one neocons wrote many years ago, and all the accompanying rhetorical tactics accusing those who seek better relations with Moscow of being Putin's stooges, unpatriotic, and suspect loyalties, etc., are the ones that have defined the neocon smear campaigns for decades. The union of Democrats and neocons is far more than a temporary marriage of convenience designed to bring down a common enemy. As this new policy group illustrates, the union is grounded in widespread ideological agreement on a wide array of foreign policy debates, from Israel to Syria to the Gulf states to Ukraine to Russia. And the narrow differences that exist between the two groups on the wisdom of the Iran deal, the nobility of the Iraq war, the justifiability of torture, are relics of past debates than live controversies. These two groups have found common cause because, with rare and limited exception, they share common policy beliefs and foreign policy mentalities. They have more in common. They always did. They had the same origin. They were basically the same people. And they've gone back and forth between the two parties without too much problem. And really, the reunification really began with the Clinton era in the 90s. It wasn't really much of a divorce. They had more in common than not. The implications of, what do you think we call it, deep state? You really have to gouge them out to get them out of there. Think about these elites. More on that coming soon. The implications of this reunion are profound and long-term. Neocons have done far more damage to the U.S. and the world than any other single group, and by a good margin. They were the architects of the invasion of Iraq and the lies that accompanied it, the worldwide torture regime instituted after 9/11, and the general political climate that equated dissent with treason. With the full-scale discrediting and collapse of the Bush presidency, these war-loving neocons found themselves marginalized, without any constituency in either party. They are radioactive, confined to speaking at extremist conferences and working with fringe organizations. All that has changed. Actually, they were working within the Obama administration. They were just low-key. Francis Fukuyama, I think, was one of the ones that backed him. In his thinking, I found it rather interesting. He was one of the ones that got me looking at the way they see things. All that has changed, thanks to the eagerness of Democrats to embrace them, form alliances with them, and thus rehabilitate their reputations and resurrect their power and influence. That leading Democratic Party foreign policy officials are willing to form new Beltway advocacy groups in collaboration with Bill Kristol, Mike Rogers, and Mike Chertoff, join arms with those who caused the invasion of Iraq, and try to launch a bombing campaign against Tehran, has repercussions that will easily survive the Trump presidency. Perhaps the most notable fact about the current posture of the establishment wing of the Democratic Party is that one of their favorite, most beloved, and most cited pundits is the same neocon who wrote Judge W. Bush's oppressive, bullying, and deceitful speeches in 2002 and 2003 about Iraq and the war on terror, and who has churned out some of the most hateful, inflammatory rhetoric over the past decade about Palestinians, immigrants, and Muslims. That Bush propagandist David Frum is regularly feted on MSNBC's liberal programs. It has been hired by The Atlantic, where he writes warnings about authoritarianism, even though he's only qualified to write manuals for its implementation, and is treated like a wise and honest statement by leading Democratic organs. Neera Tanden. This is a tweet with resist on there. She uses resist as her icon. I'm a fan of the Times, but at David Frum wrote this in December, how the GOP elite lost its voters to Donald Trump. And it's got a link and another tweet from her. We actually had a great event at Kappa Action with at David Frum, at Joan Walsh, and Roy Teixeira on it in February. And then there's a link. One sees this dynamic repeated with many other of the world's most militaristic, war-loving neocons, particularly after his recent argument with Tucker Carlson over Russia. Democrats have practically canonized Max Boot, who has literally cheered for every possible war over the two past decades, and in 2013 wrote a column titled "No Need to Repent for Support for Iraq War." It is now common to see Democratic pundits and office holders even favorably citing and praising Bill Kristol himself. There's nothing wrong with discrete agreement on a particular issue with someone of a different party or ideology. That's to be encouraged. But what's going on here is far, far beyond that. What we see instead are leading Democratic foreign policy experts joining hands with the world's worst neocons to form a new broad-based policy advocacy groups to reshape U.S. foreign policy toward a more hostile, belligerent, and hawkish posture. We see not isolated agreement with neocons in opposition to Trump or on single-issue debates, but a full-scale embrace of them that is rehabilitating their standing, empowering their worst elements, and reintegrating them back into the Democratic Party structure. If Bill Kristol and Michael Chertoff can now sit on boards with top Clinton and Obama policy advisors, as they are doing, that is reflective of much more than a marriage of convenience to stop authoritarian, reckless president. It demonstrates widespread agreement on a broad range, it'd have to be broad range of issues, and more significantly, the return of neocons to full-scale DC respectability, riding all the way on the backs of eager, grateful establishment Democrats. Now, I personally am not of the same opinion as Glenn Greenwald, particularly where Trump is concerned, and also where his policies are going. But I do agree with him in that what is going on within the Democratic Party is worse than just destructive. It's catastrophic. And while I have no problem with the destruction of the two parties, I am concerned about the condition of the U.S. itself. This realignment that could be occurring here could be a good thing, but at the same time, there are warnings that need to be attached to it. And those of you who oppose this type of warmongering, you need to reassess what you're thinking. And you're going to probably have to reassess your political values. I don't think you have much choice. So, for now, and I'll doubtless return to this issue later, but for now, we'll see you later.